Welcome to ACDC number 160. I'll drop the agenda here in the chat. It's PM issue 1598. And yeah, I guess really quickly, thanks again to Ansgar for filling in last time. I was away. And yeah, still getting caught up on some things while I was out. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So first off, I think this should be short, so I just wanted to go ahead and knock it out. Perry wanted to bring up CL releases with updated gas limit values.
Yeah, so we've made a blog post and done the analyses as well as shipped the fixes on the EL side for updated gas limits. The updated gas limit recommendation, at least according to most ELs, is 45 million. However, the CL also sets the gas limit if you're using the MEV workflow. And I know some clients have already started making releases with the default gas limit increased, and I wanted to know if there's any client that doesn't plan on doing so in the near short term. Okay, I guess that means all the CLs will have it in either their current release or the next release, right?
Yeah, do we want to set some kind of date as a deadline? Not necessarily to like accelerate releases, but more just so people would know then to update when it's ready.
Yeah, I'm not sure when clients plan on making their releases. I know the Lighthouse just made theirs yesterday or today.
Yeah, I guess more like we could say, okay, this will be ready by the end of the month, and then we can then go and coordinate with everyone else to actually update. Okay. I guess this is also something we can just keep bringing up on ACD until it's live. Okay. Yeah, there's a bunch of comments in the chat here around release schedules. So it looks like most people have it pretty soon here. Cool. Thank you. Okay. So now let's get into Fusaka. So first off, I wanted to start with a status update on Fusaka DevNet 2. I've been checking pretty much every day this week, and it was getting better and better by the day. Are there any open issues we're still aware of that we should address right now?
Yes, Luther had some P2P bug that they might want to give an update on.
So we identified some issues appearing with Nimbus. They did a good job of
Recording
trying to
stopped.
respond.
Recording in progress.
Oh, can you hear me okay? Is that all right?
Yeah, you're good. I think
Okay.
somehow someone stopped the recording, but you're good.
Sorry. So we were having some issues with protocol negotiation. We have on our side as well having a problem, but it only seems to be buggy with Nimbus. And there was a lot of churn because we were disconnecting and connecting and disconnecting and connecting. And I think there were some other issues as well with some of the other clients doing requested columns, getting empty arrays back, which we also were finding. So there's a few things, but Agnes has done a good job of responding to everything.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just keep debugging all of that. The proposals were like much spottier earlier in the week. They look pretty good now. Just looking at it, looks like there's boot node 1, which I'm not sure why that's a node here, but it is. Otherwise, yeah, proposals look pretty good. Participation's only around like 87%, let's say. Hopefully that could get a bit higher.
So some of the supernodes had some memory issues. Taku had identified the bug in their code, and it should lead to less OM issues. So also, I think Lodestar have some memory issues and Grandin as well, only on the supernode. So this issue seems to be only be present during the supernodes.
Okay, That's helpful context. Okay, so then yeah, it sounds like there are a number of issues, but essentially people are on top of them, and we'll just get those resolved. So anything else on DevNet 2? I assume we want to get DevNet 2 a bit in a more healthy state before thinking about DevNet 3, but that's the next topic.
Yeah, so DevNet 2 will probably run till the end of next week. And then we can probably think about launching DevNet 3 around the 21st or 22nd of July.
Okay. Cool. If we're good on DevNet 2 then let's go ahead and move to DevNet 3. There are a few things here. So yeah, again, I was trying to catch up from the last call. It sounds like the core PureDOS things are fairly stable. Dare I even say a spec freeze. From there, though, a few other things have come up on DevNet 3. Actually, let me grab, let's see. I'm trying to grab the DevNet 3 specs just so people have them handy. I'll put them there. Yeah, thank you. Just in case people want to refer to them here. So either way, a few things just from the agenda right now. So there was a comment from Ben here who wanted to ask about some ELIPs, clear zero, and the transaction gas cap changes. Barnabas did respond. Okay, yeah. I don't know if there's much you want to add, but
I just wanted to confirm they were in DevNet 3 because we discussed in an old testing, but yeah, it didn't seem like it was a hard confirm. That was all.
Okay, and to be clear, I think it is a hard confirm. Maybe someone else can help confirm my hard confirm. Okay, yeah, there's a comment here that I linked from Barnabas that essentially says this. Cool. Okay, so then we can get back to some CL things. So I guess the first one to kick us off here on this list would be a proposal to change Git blobs. So essentially, over the last few weeks, we changed the semantics of Git blobs v2 so that it allows what we're calling partial responses. Raul here has a proposal to basically revert back the v2 semantics and then move this partial idea into a v3. Raul, would you like to say anything else about this?
Yeah, I think the operative point is that the way that the V2 spec is currently worded in main, it does not guarantee that ELs are going to be implementing partial responses now for Fusaka, which means that we're setting ourselves up for more coordination later. And basically what we're doing here is making the support mandatory by moving it to a V3 that ELs would implement, but the CL would not use until a little bit later before Glamsterdam, between Fusaka and Glamsterdam. So the idea is that we're working on a set of gossip sub changes that will enable partial dissemination of columns at the cell level and cell level reconciliation. And for that, we need access to partial blobs. And we can roll out, the idea is to roll out this optimization without a fork, because it's set up as a gossip sub extension, which is optional. So the idea would be that at that point, that's when the CL would start consuming v3 to get partial responses. But we don't want to rehash this whole topic then. So that's why this proposal has been made.
Yeah, the goal makes sense. I guess another option here. So I think the way I understand it is that V2 right now is essentially may in like canonical spec language, as in like ELs may provide partial responses, and you want it to be a must. So we could just update the V2 to say that rather than add a V3.
Yeah, but the trade-off we're trying to hit here is that the CL is not actually going to utilize partial responses now, so we don't want to be incurring the Survey cost of actually delivering them. So that's why we constrain V2 to be all or nothing, and V3 would be the one with partial responses. And it's clearly signal that there is a behavior change between one and the other. Right now, the current interface does not make any of this explicit.
Right. Interesting. I mean, I guess even another option here is just leave the current V2 alone and just add V3 that's mandatory. But yeah, I would want to hear from CL clients if they have a view on this.
Yeah, so for Nimbus, the all or nothing was pretty good, and the partial responses are not that useful. And the thing is, I don't think they ever were claimed to be in the absence of a full ecosystem support. That's a full and tested and etc. So I would say, and I would actually agree with Raul's general points about the lack of clarity about what is and is not supported by the ELs at any given point as well, makes this kind of a low ROI thing in general to implement. At this late date in Fusaka.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is it will be useful and it lets us do some things to help without a hard fork. So this is kind of like teeing us up with the Fusaka
Yeah.
launch to then do something better before Amsterdam.
Yeah,
And the
and
question is
just to be,
like, yeah.
Right, just to add a point there, we think that the implementation lift is really low because V1 was anyway returning partial responses. So I believe the code paths exist to rehash this logic in ELs, and in fact, Geth implemented this in a matter of minutes. So this would really help for the optimizations that we're planning and we're testing. Because we do expect to consume partial responses before Amsterdam. And like the whole point is to alleviate to avoid any extra coordination at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, are people okay then reverting the V2 changes? Because I think if so, then we just do that. Then yeah, we do what this PR is proposing. And one thing is like, well, we'd still ideally want to get V3 into Fusaka, but it could be somewhat of an optional thing.
Barnabas posted on the issue for this call that there would be no Fusaka DevNet 4. If so, I would say that's, let's say, an extremely aggressive schedule for introducing a core engine API change.
Yeah, I would
It's
say
an optional
pretty
change, though,
light.
right?
Yeah, well, it's better if it's not optional. Like ideally, like the reason we want it in Fusaka is so we know that everyone has it after Fusaka, like as of Fusaka on mainnet. So ideally it's done, but it wouldn't be anything blocking like core R&D as we go to mainnet. So it's something that could be done, over say the next couple months. And then in terms of Dustin's point about this being a core change, like it's, if you've implemented the latest V2, it's just renaming that to V3 and then restoring the other, the original logic is V2. So it doesn't seem like that much. I don't know. There was a commentary about a Boolean flag in V2. I don't know if we want to reopen that part of the design space.
I mean, that was the original proposal, but I think it was rejected back then.
Okay. That one's just
So
dead. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I mean, the whole point is that V2 as it's currently worded does not even like it has the main is extremely lax. So nobody's able to tell from the outside what the EL is actually going to do, which is bad, especially when we have an exchange capability. A capability negotiation or exchange mechanism. We should just be using it. So that's why V3 seems to be the right approach. And I think the point here is that it's pretty easy to implement. It's not going to be in the critical path for Fusaka right now. We can still test it, but it's not actually going to be utilized by Fusaka right now. But if EL teams would just go and implement it, I think it would save them extra overhead in the future when this is actually going to be needed.
Yeah. Would it be easier just to again change V2 so that it's must, like the partial responses are mandated?
So the problem with that is that right now we wouldn't be using those partial responses, so would be incurring in
Okay.
the
Yeah,
overhead,
you're worried about
unnecessary
yeah,
overhead.
okay.
Yeah. And that was why that solution was deemed, that's why the optionality was included.
Okay. Well, no one's saying no, except for the fact that it just is changing the spec, and yeah, it's just going to add a little more thrash kind of late in the process. But that being said, I think it will give us pretty good gains. At least, set us up for that with cell level messaging even before Amsterdam. So yeah, Barnabas asked overhead on the CL side. I think it would essentially just be adding this new endpoint to be able to call V3. And then from there, it's more a question of, well, I think the implementation is bigger on the EL side.
Well, we're not going to be able to test it unless we do an actual partial response, right?
Yeah, but I mean, this is something we can test whenever. Are there any EL devs here who have an opinion?
Since I've implemented it in Geth, I do have an opinion. It's very easy to implement. And kind of we kind of spec the engine API this way so that we allow for these kind of soft forks and changes to the engine in between forks. So I think there's not much that we need to test there, and basically the testing can happen like EL only. The only thing that we really need to test in a DevNet is then once we have cell level messaging, but we would need to test that anyway. So yeah, I don't know. This kind of sets us up to do cell level messaging before Amsterdam in a soft fork, which I think is very easy, very good.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the only real downside then is just changing the spec. But that being said, the way I was thinking about it is I was at least expecting there to be like some minor changes today. So in that case, I think I would lean towards going ahead and making this change. Anyone feel we really should not do this?
I just don't understand why do we have to have this by Fusaka if nobody's going to implement it, nobody's going to have a way to call it, and we would not have a way to test it. Like, why can't we just scope this for Amsterdam and basically just go ship with V2 and be able to test that, and then we will scope this for Amsterdam and test it
So
in 6 months.
so the changes that we're planning do not require a fork. So we want to roll out these changes between Fusaka and Amsterdam, and we think they're going to be necessary to push the BPO confidently over specific levels. So that's why we don't want to wait for Amsterdam, and we want to introduce that change now. I mean, technically speaking, as Marius said, the engine API is prepared to introduce these capabilities at any point in time, but we just don't have a process for that. We always discuss the engine API in the context of specific forks, and the evolution is done in the context of specific forks. So we just don't have a process to modify it export. That's why we're kind of like forcing to get this, trying to rally to get it into Osaka.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I want to open this can of worms, but uh, we will have a process because assuming we do sort of like a staged BPO rollout, we essentially would have another opportunity with, say, the second BPO deployment to do this. But then at that point, it's no longer sort of this pure BPO idea, and it becomes more just another hard fork. But that would give people more time. FLCS, can we just roll back to partial responses? So I believe that's what we have right now with V2.
No, so so basically partial responses in V2 like original V2 were not supported. It was all or nothing. Then what's currently in master is very relaxed, and it basically at the may return partial responses, maybe not, maybe it's all or nothing, nobody knows. And V3 and the current spec change, what proposes is to restore V2 to all or nothing and to move partial responses to V3.
Right.
So
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what ELs have implemented so far. Maybe that's a good question. If they've already implemented the May version that's sitting on main right now. I don't know, maybe they can give us some signal.
As of DevNet 2, we have all or nothing responses.
Got it. Is that the case for the rest of ELs?
Yeah, it's the same for us.
Okay, so that's compatible with what Raul's proposing here. Basically, we just leave that as V2 and then have a V3 for this.
Exactly.
And yeah, like I think we should stretch to ship it in Fusaka, but again, it can be a lower priority, I would say. And if, as we get closer to testnets, it becomes the case that this isn't looking like we have time for it, then we can cross that bridge when we get there. Yeah, Barnabas. So if it's in Fusaka, then we know everyone updates at the hard fork, and so we can rely on it. If we don't do this, then we're kind of back in the status quo where it's like the EL maybe has it, maybe doesn't. It just gives us stronger confidence that we know we can rely on this and use it productively. Yeah, I mean, yes, like this thing would be tested before it goes to mainnet.
The
We can
testing
just
for
make
this
it a
is
DevNet.
the testing for this is literally like 2 lines. I don't understand why people are like basically we have the testing for this already. We're testing it with we can test it with eels and Hive. There's nothing to be tested there. It's basically, does this method return partial responses or not? And then we have the same test corpus that we have for V2 as well.
Yeah, I don't think the testing load is that heavy. And also, Dustin, to your point, I think Perry responded, but the idea is essentially have DevNet 3 be the like frozen specs. From there will be many DevNets, I expect, perhaps more ephemeral to test like different load and block counts and all this. So it's not that there's only DevNet 3, full stop. Okay, it sounds like we should go ahead and merge in this change from role. And yeah, so V2 will be as is. I think as people have implemented, we'd revert the changes to the repo there and then just have this functionality in this new V3. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. Let me find the agenda. Okay. Another spec issue or at least open point with DevNet 3. We have, let me just grab this draft PR here. This is not necessarily a core point to PureDOS, but it's adjacent and something that I think we want to do. So we should go ahead and get this moving. We had discussed this on a previous call, I forget which one, but basically there was this proposal to change the builder API endpoint of Git payload so that it actually just returns nothing. Right now, the proposer gives the sign blinded beacon block to say the relay returns then the unblinded data, here the execution payload and the blobs. The issue is as we scale the blobs, this now becomes like a lot of data potentially over this like one synchronous endpoint. And yeah, we expect that will cause issues. So there's a number of things to do here, or like things that could be done. The leading solution at the time was, yeah, this is an issue and we should do something. And I think there generally was weak support for just changing this endpoint so that it returns nothing at all and just having this responsibility be on the relay. From there, yeah, there's like things you could imagine the relays do in terms of the blobs and how they expose the blobs to proposers and anyone else who wants them. But I think what's simplest to move forward here is just actually make this change as given in the PR, which drops the return data from this API endpoint. So does anyone have any thoughts on this or questions to follow up to the idea? Okay, thumbs up from Terrence, and I'll assume that's a thumbs up on dropping the return. Okay. Okay, cool. Seeing a lot of thumbs up. So let's do that. Cool, that was easy. I guess one question since we're here, like there is a design space where you can imagine relays do expose the blobs almost as like a archival service or something like this. Does anyone feel like that's interesting or valuable? The reason I'm asking is this is, again, kind of a separate conversation to have with the relays, but it's something I could bring up with them. So I'm just wondering if anyone has any thoughts either way on this right now. When can we test it? I think we can get this implemented pretty quickly. It's a pretty straightforward change. Although I guess CL clients would need to also update.
This would require the builder and the relay changes on the DevNet, right? And I guess we
Really
can test
just the relay, yeah.
Okay. And I mean, we can test this on kurtosis as well, I think.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
The main issue right now is our builder. So our builder is still using an older version of REST with some dependency issues that have not been updated from Flashbox. We are working on it, and hopefully we'll have something next week.
Okay, cool. Let's see, so that was that. Okay, yeah, we touched then on a potential launch date for DevNet 3. Barnabas, I think you said something like 2 weeks from now. Maybe like, yeah, that would give the 21st. Okay. That sounds good. And then otherwise, yeah, the last time, yeah, let's just say before I was out, we were talking quite a bit about BPOs and how to implement them with this fork digest change, also about our custody. There are like a number of things here at PureDOS. I just wanted to check in, like, are we feeling good about these things now? I think we've mostly handled all the spec issues in the DevNet 2 spec, so then it's just a question of implementation. But yeah, anything to surface here before we move forward? Okay, cool. Then I did want to briefly touch from there. Yeah, the plan on actually getting this to mainnet. So I'll call out this blog post from Sigma Prime that I thought was really good. So Jimmy wrote this blog post here with their view on essentially getting PureDOS to mainnet this year. I think like some key information here would be this planning section towards the end, where basically it says something like a mid-October mainnet launch. That implies then testnets, something like Halashki in September, something like Sepulveda in August, which doesn't give us much time to get to that point. So that's sort of the second half. And the first half then is where we are today, where we basically would then say, okay, let's go ahead and iron out any issues with DevNet 2. We'd have DevNet 3 stable, or not stable is the wrong word, but we'd have DevNet 3, defined, let's say. Hopefully there aren't too many things in terms of implementation difficulties from 2 to 3. And we could then hope that DevNet 3 is like this happy path, stable PeerDOS implementation. From there, we want to turn to do, many different sorts of testing around, actually loaded these things at different blob counts, testing different BPO parameters, how that affects syncing, and yeah, all the different things that we have. So I think the main point for today is just to get this sort of rough schedule in everyone's minds. Yeah, I did want to touch on the BPO bit here, but I wonder if anyone has any comments about what I've said so far. Okay. Justin says he likes the schedule. Very good. Yeah, I would kind of consider this to be a straw man at the moment, but I think it's a nice straw man. I think it's something we should reach for. Perry brings up, we need at least a non-finality network. All right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, non-finality, different failure scenarios on networks. Syncing is another big feature set to verify. But then from there, we can decide these different BPO parameters. And then I guess that tees us up to the next point that I wanted to talk about, which is, thinking about how we actually want to do this. I think there was some discussion either on last ACDC or even ACDT this week around what we'd actually want here. It seems like from what I could catch up on that there's pretty broad support for having a more conservative rollout with Fusaka, where basically we just schedule like maybe one substantial increase at launch. Then that would imply we have a BPO update early next year to get us to like a higher number. Do people generally feel good about this? The alternative would be honestly a more aggressive option where we just try to have like more BPO scheduled with Fusaka. Yeah, okay. Reading the chat here, people are talking about syncing, so yeah, I'm not trying to get too ahead of ourselves, but more just pipelining all the things we need to do to get to Fusaka on mainnet. Ansgar?
Yeah, just to very briefly kind of recap from like I think 2 weeks ago on ACDC, we just briefly touched on different potential variations of this. So basically, like, would we want Fusaka directly to bump up blobs, or basically have one or several BPOs bundled with it, and then if we have BPOs bundled with it, basically there's the idea to either do something like very quick after the fork, so like say a week after the fork or something that just does a bump, or something that's a bit farther away so that we could already collect some data before the bump and then after the bump. So say like a month after, or we could do both. So for example, say like Fusaka itself rolls out without any changes in throughput, just switches over to PeerDOS. Then 1 week later, we have a small first kind of increase in throughput. And then like another month later, so we basically like get to whatever we think is the actual safe limit. And that way we would basically like be able to monitor the network at different levels. So that's kind of like, I think, roughly the design space, kind of like 0, 1, or 2 bundled BPOs together with the Fusaka rollout, if I remember from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess, the point I want to kind of get to is like if we had one, if we have the strategy that we want for mainnets, then we can kind of include that in like DevNet 3, sort of the like there'll be almost, well, there's like a core line of development here, which is like driving a series of dev nets to mainnet. The closer we get to mainnet, the more that should look like the actual mainnet configuration. There will be parallel streams of testing more aggressive BPO schedules, and we should also have those. But I'm trying to dial in on what we actually want mainnet to look like. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess I have a question then when we say BPO1 and BPO2 here, like what does that mean? Like what specific numbers?
We are thinking a mild increase in BPO1. So something like 8 and 12 in BPO1 or 9 and 12. I'm not sure what the correct
Yeah,
ratio would be.
I think part of the issue is that we haven't had networks stable enough for long enough to actually do any analysis. Most of the PRDAS networks we've had are like 50, 100 nodes. We would at least want to do the non-finality network as well as the really large network, so about 1,000 nodes, and then collect the data from that before we can even decide what BPO1 and BPO2 value should be. Otherwise, we're just kind of guessing.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. But then what we can, I think, agree to today is just the shape of having only 2 BPOs scheduled with Fusaka. And of course, that's all pending further development that we do. Okay. Great. And Ansgar has a comment in the chat that, yeah, he likes that. Yeah, that seems to be what most people prefer at the moment. Okay, so I believe, let me see if there are any last minute items here on the post. Nope. Okay, so I think that's what we had for Fusaka. Anything else before we move to Amsterdam? Okay, so happy Fusaka-ing. And then we'll now shift to Amsterdam and think about the future. And for Amsterdam, yeah, so some of this, I think we're doing this process for the first time, so I think we will kind of figure out live the right way to do it. One thing I did want to call out today is that there have been a number of these headliner proposals. And going off of the schedule that Tim had posted some time ago, we're kind of nearing this end of the headliner proposal section. We would then shift to deciding on a headliner. And, keyword there is a single headliner per layer, right? So there's a number of headliners. The idea here is that the headliner is, there's one of them and it's like this core sort of feature that carries the fork. And so what that means then is that we would actually pick one CL headliner on this call, as well as one EL headliner on the ACDE call. And my sense is that with Fusaka and everything, it's a bit early to go ahead and make that headliner call today. But I did want to go ahead and just say we should focus on picking one. I will note, because we're here, Mark from Lighthouse had a comment on the agenda that they would like to propose 7732 as that headliner. I will just mention that for now, just so it's on the record. But what I wanted to do instead today was just go through the set of headliners and try to narrow down the set to things that we know we don't want, or rather things that we do want, by pointing out the things we know we don't want. So this is kind of like this DFI status that we have for the IP selection, but for the headliners. So if that sounds good to everyone, then actually, let me read this chat here from Ansgar. Okay, so they're going to wait until DevNet 3, and then perhaps we should do the same thing on the CL. So yeah, I mean, I'm open to opinions on this, what people think the right process is, but it's possible we kind of want to pick them together. So it might make sense to wait even then. Okay, also just to add context to what I just said about the Lighthouse post, it sounds like there's still some disagreement there. But there was this one opinion from Jay King that I'll just copy here. And point being is I think this does highlight it is a bit early to pick the headliner. But yeah, okay, Ansgar.
Yeah, I think I mean I agree that I'd probably try to align roughly kind of between ACDC and ACDE and basically like wait a little bit longer for the full discussion. But I do think maybe if we already have it on the agenda for today anyway, we could at least briefly have a look of like which of the headliners are even kind of CL side. So how many do we have? You, for example, also on the agenda made the point of that you don't think that we could combine more than one headliner, at least on the CL side. So basically like at least briefly kind of like already talk about the kind of parameters of what the goal here is in terms of headliners?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's get into it then. So let's see. I'm actually going to go off of this website Forkcast. I'm not sure if people have seen this, but they should all be here, and it's a nice little UI. So, okay, let's just focus on CL things today. And that means, so yeah, we have 7732 EPPS, very much then 7782, which is reducing the slot times to 6 seconds. There's 7805, which is fossil. Delayed execution, I would say, is mostly an EL concern, so we'll leave that out unless someone wants to touch on it. One thing there is like it does kind of touch on many of the same design concerns as EPPS. Pureth is here, which this one would touch on some CL things because there's a number of SSD changes. Sorry, I just clicked the wrong button. Block level access list we can put to the side, EVM 64, and this available attestation one. So, okay. Out of the set here then, yeah, we have EPPS, 6 second slots, fossil, Pureth, and available attestation. So from there, I guess, yeah, maybe following then from Ansgar's point, like, you know, how do we want to go about this? Like, one idea I had for today was essentially to say, like, we can DFI particular headliners that we know we don't want, and that will then narrow down the decision set for people to then go and make their selections for future calls. So, I guess I'm open to anyone who wants to speak up and propose a particular DFI for a headliner. And what I mean there, it's kind of a shorthand, but essentially like things we think we don't want as the single headliner. And maybe to make this a little easier, well, yeah, it's a little tricky without just editorializing some EIPs. So, anyone have any thoughts? I guess I could start it this way. Do people feel that, okay, this is tricky because I don't want to really bias the discussion here.
So I would just go through all of the different proposals and see if there's some client team who says that this is something that they categorically do not want.
Okay. Well, then we can just start here with your comment, Marius, where it says you don't think we should do this available attestation thing. So yeah, does anyone feel like we should have that as a headliner? So yeah, maybe just a process note with NC. Are all these proposal EIPs CFI'd? So I believe none of them are CFI'd for Glamsterdam, right? We're still at the point, I think, of selecting, and someone correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think essentially we would have these selected. And then I guess, like, for example, once we select the headliner, that would be CFI'd. And then there'll be a second stage where we CFI other things and proceed that way. So, okay. Going back to this available attestation EIP, it seems like that should not be a headliner. So I think we have agreement there. And please, someone speak up if you feel differently. Okay. I guess then I'll just kind of go in reverse order here on this list. So then period, like, do we feel like periods should be, oh, Solius?
Yeah,
Did you have a comment? Yeah.
yes. So my comment would be maybe we instead of trying to pick a particular EIP, maybe we should try to pick a particular theme that is most important for the next upgrade. For example, the PeerDAS was a quite good thing because the actual theme was that we want to scale blobs. So my proposal would be maybe we should first try to figure out what is the most important thing that we want to improve instead of trying to pick a particular EIP, because when we are focusing on a particular EIP, we kind of move slightly to to decide the main thing, what exactly we want to improve in Ethereum. So that would be my proposal how to proceed with this.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to go about it. And we had discussed this some, maybe like 3 or 4, maybe even 5. Once we had first opened the like Lamstream discussion on ACDC, we had spent some time talking about this, and at the time at least, we had said the scalability was this theme. Then the question is like, okay, like does EPBS scale? And you can make an argument there. There is even an argument that Fossil in some sense falls under the scaling theme. But yeah, so I would say generally there's agreement on scaling being this theme, and maybe we need to like decide exactly what scaling means here. But then ultimately, yeah, I think assuming we all kind of understand a little bit what we mean when we say that, then I would say that would rule out things like available attestation, things like period. Fossil, I think, is an open question. And then from there, there's just this ongoing conversation of EPBS, 6-second slosh, late execution, and how we want all of that to fit together. So with that being said, do we feel like that's a reasonable assessment of the headliner so far? Ansgar, I don't know if you had a comment to that or something else.
Yeah, specifically to that point, I just wanted to say that in principle, I think having some sort of general direction of the fork makes a lot of sense to me, and I agree with that. What you said about making it about scaling the L1. But I just wanted to say that to me, that is less clear on the CL side than on the EL side. So I think on the EL side, once we have that conversation, that's something that I will push for very actively. I think on the EL side, like all of the main features that I find attractive are around scaling, block level access lists, and then on the non-headliner side, basically like pretty severe repricings. And so that will basically give us a lot of headroom for scaling. To me, then that makes it much more optional on the CL side to also follow the same theme, because if we, for example, prioritize delayed execution, which we very well might do, and then we just get like a very big one-time scaling bump out of Glamsterdam and then basically plateau afterwards. Whereas, given that we already get this bump out of the EL, it would also be totally fine to say on the CL we focus for one more fork on something else, like say, for example, shorter slot times, I think is the main contender that I've heard for people that don't like EPBS in Amsterdam, and then we would basically only do these CL side scaling improvements in H star. So I just want to say that like the general theme of scaling, I think, is more binding on the EL side than on the CL side.
Fair. And then, like you could imagine we use scaling in a more loose sense, right? Like you could start to make the argument that shorter slot times does scale things, or well, yeah, it's actually hard to make the argument, but yeah, okay, but yeah, fair point. Yeah, also from here, there's like a bunch of discussion in the chat now. And I think, let me read Phil's message here. Makes sense that within, right. Yeah, so yeah, Phil, to your point, this is kind of what I wanted to do today, just make the claim that, well, okay, what I had said is that we would make the headliner selection on the next ACDC. Given the pacing of ACDE, I think I'm gonna, at least I would propose to push that back to be more in line with ACDE. So what that means for today is that we're still kind of in, we're not quite at the point yet where we can actually decide headliners, which I also think is good because, again, just referencing the chat, I think there's still a pretty active discussion around how all these different things fit together. So on that point, I'm not sure we're going to make much progress on this further today. Yeah, Barnabas, I'll echo what you have here in the chat. Making a statement about preferences would be really good because, yeah, otherwise we'll just kind of, we could easily go in circles synchronously on, some given ACDC. So having some thoughts written down is really useful. And again, timeline wise, then I would say we probably have more than 2 weeks. I'll circle back with Tim to see exactly what he's thinking on ACDE side, but I would like to kind of have them happen concurrently. So yeah, I think that's probably it on this point for today. And takeaway being, keep thinking about the headliners that you'd want. It does sound like there's preference for some combination of EPBS or 6-second slots or fossil as headliners today. But yeah, again, the conversation will keep evolving. Okay. So then in that case, I think that's all we had on the agenda. Are there any other comments or points someone would like to bring up today? Okay. If not, then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks, everyone. To say, Ansgar, do you want to speak to the comment you had? I'd have to go find it, but you had a comment in the chat.
Oh, you mean on the timeline? Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think basically on the ACDE side, the decision was to basically first wait until basically the immediate attention on Fusaka is kind of lower, meaning that like DevNet 3 is out and there's no like emergencies around DevNet 3 non-finalization or something anymore to that take up most of the attention of the call. And so once we have a call to start focusing on headliner discussion, that we would then have one call for discussion and then the call after for decision basically. So a 2 week span for making that decision. So effectively that would mean that probably next week's ACDE at least would still be Fusaka related, and then either the 2 weeks and then 4 weeks after would be the ones for the decision. So 5 weeks from now, or if there's any hiccups or something with DevNet 3, then that would be delayed by another 2 weeks basically.
Yeah, so to play that back, to put us this question around deadline, I think I like that. Like basically, let's focus on DevNet 3 for now. Once DevNet 3 is healthy, then we would then engage the headliner discussion. And yeah, having a call for discussion and then another call after that to make the decision seems pretty reasonable. Does that work for everyone here? Yeah, Oscar.
Yeah, not on the timeline. Just one last general comment. I do think it would be healthy if we all could also like then already like over the next 2 weeks think about how we could ideally um, surface some kind of opinions from kind of Ethereum stakeholders that don't usually participate in ACD, so that we don't end up in a situation where we make the headliner choice and then everyone else is like, oh, you didn't listen to us or something. I think in this like fork, the risk of this is lower, but still, yeah, just want to mention it.
Yeah, which is just like thinking about it, it seems a little tight because if we have, say, one call to do discussion and then another call to do decision, that kind of implies you'd want all these different stakeholders on the one discussion call, which we can do. At least we could try. But yeah, it's might be a little tricky to coordinate everything. The alternative is we just take the time between now and then to just try and get these different voices on ACD. Or yeah, I guess other forums as well would be nice. Okay. I think we go ahead and wrap it up unless anyone has anything else.
Could you not schedule that stakeholder meeting for like next ACD?
You mean like next week?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tricky because there's probably many different types of people we want to get involved, and it would only be like a week to get them there. There's also like I think a different set of people across ACDC and ACD. So in general, I think we should try to do this, but I think doing it by next Thursday will be tricky.
I mean, getting everyone there, like people that care about the next update will show up, and people that don't will not. That's my take.
Yeah, but it's more fine-grained than the next update, right? Because it's like, okay, let's say we want to talk about EPBS. There's, many people here. There are other people who are in like the Meta ecosystem. There are other people then thinking about shorter slots in like DeFi ecosystem in different places. So that's just like all on the CL side. And then I imagine there's slightly different concerns on the EL side. Yeah, Ansgar asked like, what does scheduled stakeholder meetings mean? And like really what we mean here. So I think POTUS gives a really nice example of what I was talking about for EPBS, where it's like, this feature would touch the concerns of all these different ecosystem players. And again, for each EIP, you can imagine like slightly different sets, or in some cases, very different sets. So yeah, it's just kind of tricky to pull off. And then from there, it's like, do we need them all in ACD? C or D. Sorry, C or E. Maybe not, because it might be more convenient to get like async inputs, say on ETH Magicians or different places like that. I was laughing about Francesco's comment here. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all. And yeah, we'll continue the conversation both async and on the next calls. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the call.
Bye, everyone.